Hello and welcome to my review of Logan's Run. Now, as you can probably tell, with it being the height of summer and everything, I have a cold. Logan's Run was written in 1969 by William F. Nolan, who wrote 4 or 5 sequels as well, and George Clayton Johnson, who would go on to find some success as a screenwriter. And I think that screenwriting background, or future perhaps, is represented here in the fact that this is only 165 pages long, none of which is exactly a wall of text. It's got a real brevity to it, but that's not to say that it doesn't have some interesting literary devices going on as well. Chapter numbers count down from 10. Each chapter begins with an italicized snippet, the thoughts of somebody who we assume to be Francis, the bad guy of the piece, and his pursuit of the heroes Jess and Logan. It does add a little bit of tension, but what it does do after the reveal of who Francis really is, it fails the sixth sense test, if you like, can you go back and still have the same effect from it. In this instance you can't, because there are phrases like they were mice in the trap, or they were within his grasp, or he was about to intercept them, which makes little sense when you know who Francis is. The book is set in 2116, so 100 years or so in the future, and young people have taken over the world. This is not particularly developed, or perhaps it just exposes a Western-centric view, because places like Asia and the Islamic nations, where respect for your elders and tradition is more deeply ingrained than perhaps it is in the West, those places are just not mentioned. The narrative is restricted mostly to America, but there are a couple of other places mentioned, which are the UK and I think either France or Germany. So basically there was an uprising by young people due to exploding youth population, which of course isn't happening if we're to believe what we're told. Western people have fewer children these days and live longer, so we have an aging population. But that's not to say that doesn't lead to a separate set of tensions, because as we've seen in the UK with Brexit, we had a sharp generational divide there, which can be easily politicised. So while I want to say it's really stupid, you can kind of see that perhaps it doesn't always feel that way. And it was written against the backdrop of the 60s student protests, so it might even have seemed at the time like social commentary. And it might even, again, we're told that the students of today are increasingly grumpy, and I am a student myself, but I've always been this grumpy. So in this world, when you reach 21, you're put to sleep. Or if you're unwilling, you can go on the run and seek a place where apparently runners can live in peace, which is called sanctuary. But that's where the Sandmen, the SS of the future, come in. They will hunt you and they will put you to sleep forcibly at the barrel of a gun. So as I mentioned, it's a short novel. It's quite colloquial. Descriptive passages are really kept to a minimum, which helps with the pacing. Logan's character is a little bit ambiguous for a while. It's not clear whether he's doing this out of his duty as a Sandman to stop the train of refugees to sanctuary to kill the runners, or whether he's doing it because he in fact wants to run himself. We get an idea of what life is like in this world. It's one of largely meaningless sex and even more worthless drugs. There's a lot of gang culture among the cubs, which is the younger of the younger generations. It's a real dystopian future, a society in decay, and it's quite well represented despite the author's brevity. There's a little bit of contrast from the Sandmen. Some of them are quite matter-of-fact and business-like, but at the same time there's others that seem to really enjoy what they do a little bit too much. And up to the point where we count down to chapter 8, where they leave LA, things are really quite good, very interesting, quite exciting, and to the point where I was starting to think that this might be one of the better science fiction novels that I've read. It doesn't quite maintain that standard, as we'll discuss. So they leave LA and they go to an underwater food processor called Molly, and it's at this point we're treated to a little bit of the detail, the genesis of the world and its various parts. And it feels so out of place that it kind of derails the novel, and it never ever gets back on track. In fact, it just gets more and more off track. So When they get to Molly, people try to kill them. They escape from there. They end up in a prison on an iceberg where everybody tries to kill them. Then they go from there to meet Box, who's kind of the gatekeeper of the prison. He's half man, half robot, and he tries to kill them, but apparently only after he sculpted them in the nude for some reason. From there they go to Crazy Horse Mountain in Dakota, which you really should Google, by the way, because I did after reading this part of the book to see whether any of it was true or not, and it's actually really quite cool and interesting, unlike this half of the book. So under Crazy Horse Mountain they find a robot nursery where a robot nanny tries to mother them to death. Outside is a gang of yobs wanting to snoo them to death for some reason. I assume that reason to be quite closely related to either Nolan or Johnson's masturbatory fantasies. But if you think about that, then you really need to try not to think about the age of these people, because Logan is 21, but they're not. Some of them are even as many as 7 years younger than that. So it's a little bit creepy, it's a little bit gross, but what it really is a lot of tiresome. Logan's death by 101 orgasms, I'm going to put that on the screen here. Quite what they were thinking of at this point, I really don't know. But in the words of Robert Downey Jr., perhaps they'd gone full retard. But if they hadn't at that point, they certainly did in the next bit, where Jess and Logan take part in a historical reenactment of a Civil War battle. Only in the future, for live-action roleplay, they liven things up by using real cannons and muskets. Yeah. By this point, I really was just willing it to please just end. But on it goes with a brief interlude to describe how this world came about, which is just more stupidity. Where the movie works and this doesn't is that the society of the movie is confined to a limited area, this domed city. But with the book, it's apparently the whole world. As I mentioned earlier, there's a bit of a grey area there, but it's certainly the whole of America. Well, America's a pretty big place, as you can probably imagine. If you live there, you don't even need to imagine. There are lots of places where people can hide. Mexico, Canada, perhaps even Cuba, would they take in some of these runners? But even then, you can't help but think there are places inside America where they can hide. There's hundreds and hundreds of miles of woodlands, But you can't help but feel that somewhere in America there would be somebody that would help them hide, or somebody that was just so remote that they could hide. But no, apparently this sanctuary is, spoiler alert, is on the moon. No, that'd be too sensible, I tricked you there. It's actually on Mars. Yeah. Logan's Run so nearly broke my spirit. I recommend it to absolutely nobody unless you're trying to build a fire and need kindling. And there's 5 sequels to this. 5. If you bought this book, shame on you, you encouraged that. Oh, I guess that includes me because I bought it as well. So please, by all means, check out some of my other videos where I review books that are better than this one.